Hello and welcome to the Squeaky Stool. I have a squeaky piano stool, that's why it's called that. Now, most people who have seen my videos will know that actually I'm much more of a performer, been doing a little bit of sort of lockdown performing. It's been a tough year, let's not beat around the bush. And then I suddenly thought, well, let's have a go at something a bit different. Let's try being a musicologist. Now, most people who know me well will know that actually I am a bit of a music nerd. There's stuff I see in music that I really shouldn't, perhaps. Maybe I'm just making it up, I don't know. Maybe I am in this video. That's down to you guys to decide. That's the wonderful thing about musicology, is that it is half evidence and half opinion. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, today is the 16th of December 2020. The 16th of December 2020 is the 250th anniversary, officially, of Beethoven being born. Now, Ludwig van Beethoven was born, we think, on the 16th of December 1770. Might have been a day before, might have been a day after, may even have been a year before or a year after. His father rather famously used to exaggerate how young Beethoven was when he was trying to bandy him around as a prodigy. As a result, actually, even Beethoven wasn't 100% sure. It's a rabbit hole that somebody else can go down. As far as we're all concerned, the official birthday is the 16th of December 1770. It's certainly the one that was celebrated in the Peanuts comics every single year, where Shredder would come around with his little things going only, 16 days till Beethoven's birthday, the 1st of December, things like that. And it's the reason why I remember Beethoven's birthday being the 16th of December is because of the Peanuts comics, thanks to Charles M. Schulz. Why Beethoven? Beethoven is one of the most important composers. He emancipated musicians from servitude, for the most part. Mozart has set that in place. I mean, Mozart had gone freelance, and very famously so. But Beethoven went one step further. He was actually given the freedom of the city of Vienna at one point because of his dedication to music in the city. And he rather famously turned around and said to one of his famous, patron employers, "Sir, there are many counts, but there is only the one Beethoven." The man certainly knew his worth, especially considering, his, the precarious position of all musicians at the time. At this point, he didn't realise he was going deaf, or certainly hadn't made that public. Now, Beethoven wrote many, many pieces that are famous. 9 symphonies, very famously, possibly a 10th, again, another rabbit hole. 32 piano sonatas, which are considered as important to the repertoire as Bach's 48 Preludes and Fugues. Now again, you could turn around and say that's actually 35 piano sonatas if you include the Kurfürstensonaten that he wrote when he was 12, or thereabouts. We then also have the piano concertos, of which there are 5, or indeed one could turn around and say there are 6, because there is the violin concerto, which he transcribed for piano and orchestra. Rarely played actually, but it's published as Opus 61A. And that's often referred to as the 6th piano concerto. But I'm going to concentrate on the 4th piano concerto. Why the 4th? Well, because for me, the central movement does something extraordinary. It pitches the piano against the orchestra like David and Goliath, but very subtly, and the piano wins. It's nothing short of a manifesto for the soul and the voice of one against the voice of many. Something that everybody considers to be the romantic ideal of Beethoven, and you just get that image of Beethoven standing up against all the authorities and turning around and saying, "Yes, there may be many of you, but there's only one of me." Why the 4th piano concerto is also very important is that it received its public premiere in 1808 alongside, wait for it, the 5th Symphony, the 6th Symphony, the Chorale Fantasia, and a couple of other works that were published around the same time, possibly. It is certainly one of the most celebrated concerts of the early 1800s. Incredibly famous. And actually, we're about to approach the 212th anniversary of that concert on the 22nd of December. All right, why is that important? Well, for me, the entire concert is based on one motif. And certainly if you go looking in Beethoven's music, it's nearly always there. It's practically ubiquitous. The first piano sonata, Opus 2 number 1, written somewhere around 1795, dedicated to his then teacher Haydn. Now if you go listening to the accompaniment, dum. All right then, what about the Pathetique sonata? Dum. Dum. Now you can go listening for is actually all the way through the Pathetique Sonata number 8. This was written in 1799. The famous slow movement doesn't really have it until you get to the second subject, or third subject really. So you get to... No sign of it yet. It's there. It's very heavily disguised. The reason why I'm mentioning it, because actually the third movement has it in spades. Which is actually, really is derived from the second subject of the Pathetique. Pretty much exactly the same notes. Fifth, tonic, second, minor third. Now that rhythm is everywhere in Beethoven, and here it is. I've got one prepared for you. You can even see the light of my lovely camera light in the reflection of that. Jum. Now sometimes it has the accent on the second beat, sometimes it does not. But it's there. It's pretty much everywhere. Even in one of the most famous pieces of Beethoven, indeed possibly the most ubiquitous pieces of Beethoven. Did you hear it? And indeed, if I was to break that down, fifth, root, second, minor, third, is exactly again from the Pathetique Sonata. So a sort of sad motif in Für Elise, if you like. Okay, I'll stop harking on about that and start going to the more famous examples. Beethoven 5, very famously, the entire symphony is written on this. It is often referred to, indeed, as the Fate Symphony, because this is referred to as the Fate motif. The first movement is very famously built up entirely on that. One rather curious little side fact is that the first movement is in fact completely symmetrical. Every section is either 168 or 167 bars long. Every section, all 5 of them. Absolutely astonishing for a piece that seems so utterly capricious. However, the whole symphony, as I said, is based on that. The other pieces that were involved in that concert were the 6th Symphony and the Chorale Fantasia. Now, I'm going to say now, I've looked at the Chorale Fantasia, I've looked for this ja motif. It's sort of there, particularly right at the very end with those triplet scales going up. One might say that's possibly seeing too much into it, but it's there. This is where musicology and opinion can get really, really messy. But there's no doubting it's there in the 6th Symphony. Here is my copy of the list. Piano transcriptions of the 6th to 9th symphonies. I can't play them. I'm nowhere near that good, as anybody who's heard me play the piano, and indeed butcher anything by Beethoven, will understand. Okay, we've kind of got this sort of call to arms that we get, or call to action, in that very first thing. It's almost like a shepherd's pipe call. That's why it's called the pastoral, after all. Now, when you get to Beethoven's breakdown of this, he's constantly breaking it down to just that motif. If I go to another page, here we go. Cha 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 cha. You can hear that motif all the way through. And I could go to a number of pages, and nearly every single one of those pages I will find that motif in the first movement. Alright, well, what about the fourth piano concerto? Surely it's not there. Well, the fourth piano concerto is unusual before you even get past the first 5 bars. Now, normally a piano concerto will involve a solo instrument and an orchestra, and the orchestra will kick things off, and the soloist will sit there or stand there if they're a violinist or other kind of instrumentalist that requires standing, and they will do what they do, and they'll join in with their solo part. Beethoven basically goes, nah, while I'm waiting for you guys to get yourselves all warmed up and everything, I'm going to get started. Lovely G major chord as a warm wake up to everybody. I think I heard something there. Okay. Now, Beethoven sets his stall very early with this one of Man Against the Machine, because the orchestra go, hang on a minute. Now, you could either take this as a moment of they've got surprised and they've just literally started in the wrong key, or they've simply said, hang on, young man, we're not going to play in G major, we're going to play in B major, which is about as far away from G major as you could possibly get, apart from C sharp. Actually, they're not that. They're a bit quieter, a bit more polite. They can't sustain it, of course. They realise they actually do need to play in G major, and by now, I can't play the orchestral parts, I'm nowhere near talented enough. But you can hear that motif again. Ja, 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 ja. And again, if I go through this whole thing, it pervades the whole way through. You've got the piano part, the orchestra. Ah, okay, we've definitely got ja, 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 ja going on there. Okay, enough about the first movement, because apart from that, it's not the most remarkable movement in the world. It's a brilliant piece of music. But then we come to the slow movement, and that's really what I'm going to talk about. I've been waffling on already for 13 minutes, and I'm only just coming to this. Well, I've given you a lot of background information. Hopefully it's useful. But we start... Well, actually, there's one thing. Before I even get into that, there's one thing that's even more extraordinary about this movement. It's only the string section of the orchestra. Only the strings. No woodwind. No horns. That would be the only brass instrument in this. And indeed, no timpani. Just strings. And for my money, now I've heard many recordings of this, and it is always played, for my money, a little too politely. There are some standout recordings out there where you get the orchestra playing exactly as Beethoven instructs. That is to say, forte, indeed, fortissimo, with quite sharp staccati. Wow. Unison, single voice of the orchestra, all turning around and saying, this is what we're playing this time. Quite a sharp attack, and indeed very un-second movement-like, because actually, if you think of most second movements of any piece of music, with generally where the beauty is, and indeed, when Beethoven starts the piano part, here it comes. Interestingly, actually, Beethoven starts that in B major, just like he does with the orchestra in the first movement. That it doesn't sound quite so jarring because the key of this is E minor, so as a result it's the dominant key, so it would be the natural place to start from. But it's still interesting nonetheless. What's also interesting is that this is in harmony, it's in homophony, that is to say chords moving together, like a chorale or a hymn. Something that Beethoven actually was to return to quite a bit in the later sonatas, particularly Opus 109 and Opus 111 piano sonatas, the 30th and 32nd. Sorry, 31st and 32nd. No, 30th and 32nd. Duh. Now, it's extraordinarily beautiful. And you'd thought, well, okay, well, the orchestra can pick that up. But the orchestra say, no, absolutely not. We're going to go back to here. Back in your box, Beethoven. Orchestra have decided they're now going to modulate to A major. Well, Beethoven comes in, of course, on the tonic that is the dominant, that A major will be the dominant, so here we have D major. Only this time, the orchestra decide not to let him finish. Ouch. Cut right down. But he's not perturbed. And all of a sudden, we hear this. I mean, harmonically in itself, actually quite ambitious. But did you see it? Or did you hear it? Bum, 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 ba. It just allows that just to sort of die away. I'm making my statement, says Beethoven. Orchestra say, no. Beethoven says, yes. And Beethoven foreshortens even further to just single notes. And the piano this time carries on with its hymn-like tune. But then, before I carry on, do you hear that? Ja-da-da-ja-da. Deliberately writes a triplet here. Now, why is this important? He's very deliberately making an emphasis of ja-ja-ja-ja. Because he could have just as easily written instead we get this. Beautiful downward scale, very simple, beautifully simple. Now the orchestra now are starting to go, okay, we get it. But they're still trying to insist on their theme. But now very quietly. And we get that fate motif. Piano now is starting to go, absolutely not, I'm going to take over now. And from here on it is pretty much the piano all away. Just the chords there where the orchestra come in, and now we're into basically all piano. happens here is something I consider to be utterly magical, and so radically far advanced of anything Beethoven had really written at the time. You've got some chords already in this that are pretty spicy, and Beethoven was known for spicy chords. Even in the very first piano sonata, we get this sort of extraordinary chord that comes in the first piano sonata. But nothing quite prepares us for this. This sounds 50 years too early. A cadenza. Almost dissonant. Whoops. And finally, the orchestra are subdued. We get this extraordinary colour. I'm just going to mention that little bit there. There is that moment. It's a very poignant moment actually in Beethoven. You could almost put the words Hilfe Mir on those words, on those notes. Hilfe Mir. I may be reading way too much into this, and I probably am, and I'm going to have people putting comments in going, what the hell are you on about, Edwards? God, man. And because, you know, reaction to music is often quite personal. But I've always heard that because it's so out of place with what has just happened. Could just as easily indeed be O freunde, nicht, töne, which of course we get very famous in the bass singing O freunde, nicht, töne in the Ninth Symphony. But this feels much more imploring. And the orchestra then just simply fading away on that E minor chord, and the piano lamenting on the very last arpeggio. Now Beethoven actually launches straight into the last movement, which actually he starts in C major, not in G major. The orchestra again going, no, actually we're going to go this way, but it's much more in the spirit of, you know, reconciliation. And again, the Beethoven, the piano part comes back. Dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. It's that motif all over again. Beethoven, with this work, for me, the Fourth Piano Concerto is, I think, the greatest of all of them, even greater than the Emperor Concerto, and I'll probably be shouted out for that one as well. But it's certainly a manifesto. It certainly makes us go, here's where the piano, the soloist, breaks free of the orchestra. Now, later concertos, of course, were going to follow the classical model. Chopin's concerti famously do. And indeed, actually almost go into the sort of early classical Baroque idea of having pianists joining in with the orchestra as a, you know, just as part of a continuo tutti section. Something that happens actually in a lot of Mozart concertos, and I've heard recordings of Beethoven concertos done that way as well. Not the Fourth, I hasten to add. So that is Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto, and particularly that slow movement, and how that motif helps release the soloist from the orchestra draw your own conclusions. I could sit here and give you conclusions all day long, but then this video would be over an hour long and we would be very bored. 25 minutes feels about right, doesn't it? So I'm going to sign off from the Squeaky Stool. The Squeaky Stool, there we go. Sure, schools are equally squeaky. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. Please indeed click like and subscribe and all those other things, and hopefully I will be looking to do another one in the very short future. In the meantime, wishing you all a very Merry Christmas, and indeed my partner, who is 40 today on the 16th of December 2020. Happy birthday, Catherine, my love. Wishing you all the very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, stay safe, stay well, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye-bye.